everyone, it's Dianne at Minerva. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. And today I'm going to share with you a make for a beautiful little top. And it's this pattern, New Look 6434. As you can see, there are different variations that we can make, but we're going to be making View C today. So it's a sleeveless version right here. And what we're going to be using is a Minerva exclusive cotton sateen. Now this particular design is called Jungle Dreamer. I love this one. Just look at that design, isn't it gorgeous? I think it's really fun. So wash and prepare that fabric before we get started, and then when you've done that, take a tape measure and measure yourself for the perfect fit. And now we're ready to go and cut our pattern pieces together. So let's go and do that now. So here we have our pattern pieces for our top. So here we have the back, and you're going to cut two pieces. The straight grain is this way, and make sure that you cut the right point. So we're making view C, so you want to make sure that you cut for the correct view of the top. We also have notches here and here, and these markings. So it's going to have a button and loop at the back, so you need to make sure that you mark here. Then we have the front, and we're going to cut one on the fold. The fold line is here. Make a note of your markings and also the dart points. There is a line here, or a double line, where you can lengthen or shorten on both pieces. Here we have the lower ruffle for view C. This time you're going to cut two pieces on the fold, and the fold line is here. Make sure if you're using a directional print that you've got your fabric the right way up, and make a note of your notches. So now we're ready to begin making our top. So first of all, you want to wind half of your thread onto your machine spool and check that your needle is sharp. Now I'm using a standard needle, a size 80 today, on this cotton sateen. You may wish to test this before we get started and just see what works best for you. When you've done that, we're ready to begin sewing. So let's do that now. So first of all, we're going to stay stitch around our front neck edge. We want to do this 6mm away from the raw edge. Now we're going to create our darts in our front pieces. So we have our markings, that's the point that we're working towards, and I've placed a pin at each side here so that you can clearly see. So here's my pin, and then you have your markings at the side like this. So I've made a little notch where they are, and we're going to pinch that together so the right sides of the fabric are coming together. Bring your markings together at the side, and we're working towards this point here. So that's where my pin head is. Now we don't want to come off too suddenly, it wants to be a gradual V, otherwise we will get a bump in the fabric. So we're going to create that dart now. So stitch towards that point in a gradual V. I've also made my stitch a little smaller at this point. Just run off at the end like this and leave your thread running free so that we can knot it down towards the point. Press that dart down flat and then repeat on the other side. Now before we go any further, we're going to trim away 6mm from the armhole edge on the front and the back pieces. So I've got mine folded in half. You may wish to do this on the single if you wish. We're doing this just because we're not adding sleeves here. It's a sleeveless version that we're making, so we don't need quite as much at this point. You can use a rotary cutter, of course, if that's what you prefer to use. Now stay stitch around your back neck edges. Now at this point I've overlocked down the sides of my front panel and also my back panels and down the centre back. This is because I want to be able to press my seams open. You can of course attach your front to your back and then overlock your seams together or edge finish with a zigzag stitch if you wish. But as I wish to press mine open, I've done mine separately before I sew the side seams. Then we're going to apply our back pieces to our front pieces like this. We're going to pin it at the side seam, and it's a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So make sure that your markings still line up. If you've overlocked first, as I have, you will need to remark them with chalk. So we're going to pin it down the sides, and we're also going to pin it at the shoulder point, matching your notches. Now stitch down your side seams. So remember, it's a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance at this point. Back tack to begin. And now the shoulders. Now at the centre back point, when you're stitching the back seam, you only want to sew up to this point here, because we're going to have a back vent. So where my pin is here, we're going to stitch to this point, then we're going to back tack to reinforce it. Then we're going to press that seam open and flat, and also these top points here want pressing open and flat. Now cut yourself a piece of elastic large enough to go around your button. Place it at the mark point at the top like this and stitch it in place. I'm going to do it with hand stitches first of all, just because I find it's quite tricky to pin. And then when I've done this, I'm going to top stitch around my opening at the back. So I'm doing this first so that the top stitching will also reinforce where the elastic is. So stitch it on first of all, go over it with your machine, and then do your top stitching around the outer of the back neck vent, like this. Now open up a length of your bias tape like this, let it extend by 1 centimetre, and then we're going to place it flat against the neck edge. We're going to stitch with a 1 centimetre seam. Now turn your tape to the inside, enclosing your raw edge, and you can baste it in position and then top stitch from the outside if you wish, or you can just do this from the inside. Now I find that the tape gives you a nice line to follow, so you may just wish to do this from the inside. Now it'll look like this from the inside, and it's nice and neat on the outside. We're now going to apply that same principle to the armholes. So we're going to open up our bias tape and we're going to pin it right sides facing on the outside around the armhole. Again, you need to make sure that you let a centimetre overlap here, and then when you come to this end we will have enough to lap it over and turn it under. So we're going to apply our binding tape now. Now stitch it in place with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Now turn your bias tape to the inside, and again you can either baste it in position and top stitch, or you can just stitch it from the inside on the very edge here. Remember to overlap when you come back to the underarm seam here and enclose that raw edge. Now you're going to take your ruffles and you're going to join the two short ends like this. So match the notches and stitch with a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. You're going to do this on both sides. Now you can edge finish your raw edge, either overlock or zigzag stitch. Now we're going to stitch a line of gathering stitches around the top notched edge. So make sure you have your ruffle the right way up, that you have the edge with the notches in, and you might find it's easier if you do a line of gathering stitches between the two seams on one side and then the other, and then you can pull them and make sure that they're even. I've also notched and marked the centre point of each of the ruffles so I can find the centre front and the centre back on my top also and match these points up. So you may also wish to do that. Change to a longer stitch to create your ruffle. Now you can do 2 rows of gathering stitches if you wish. That sometimes makes it easier to get the gathers even. Now you're going to pin your ruffle to the bottom of your top, matching the notches, and also, as I said before, it's best to mark the centre point. So I've done that, and then from the side seam where I've pinned it, I've pulled on the gathering stitches to the centre, pinned it on that side, and then pulled from the side seam at this side again towards the centre, and then that way it makes sure that you get your gathers more even rather than trying to do it all at once. And now that I've done the fronts, I'm going to do the back. So here you can see I've pinned it, there was my mark, there's the centre back seam, and here is the side. So we have all of this, and this needs to be gathered into here, and we also have this notch here at the back that needs to be gathered in just there. So if I just put a pin there as well on each side, and then pull on my gathering stitches, pin it in position, and then we can stitch over that and stitch it in place. Now once you've stitched it in place and you're happy that it's all even and flat, you can overlock or edge finish those raw edges together as well. Now sew on your ruffle. Now turn up the hem on the bottom of your blouse, so it's a 1.5 centimetre hem allowed. You could do a double fold if you wish, but on this particular blouse, with it having a frill, I've just overlocked it and I'm just doing a single hem. Now finally you're going to sew on your button. Now I found it was best to lay it down on the table, put my elastic across the shank of the button here, and just see where it would lie when it was pulling on the elastic. So I found that was a little bit further in. So just test it out before you sew your button on. So here is the finished top. Well, I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me today. Please let us know in the comments below if you've sewn this top before, and remember to include any photographs. I do love the different variations. I mean, you can add trim to the sleeves, you can add an overlay of lace, you can also add lace to this particular version around the join here where the frill meets the bottom. So lots of different ideas to play around with. I look forward to seeing what you've been making. Remember to take a look at the Minerva Craft Club, where you can get 10% off all your orders for a whole year, and you can join in with us with our wonderful worldwide sewing community here at Minerva. Create a free account and it's all completely free. I love seeing what other people have made, and it helps me gain inspiration for what I'd like to make in the future. Well, that's all from me for today. I hope to be back soon with another sew along for you. If you like this top that I'm wearing today, I will include the pattern and the fabric in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.